There is a moment, sometime around midnight, when history begins to whisper differently than it does in daylight. Names fade, stories wear away, and entire lives lie hidden beneath the weight of 3,000 years of dust. Everyone knows the towering pyramids, the golden masks, the battles carved in temple walls. But behind all of that, behind the thrones, the rituals, and the rise and fall of dynasties, there were women, forgotten women, moving quietly through a world that rarely recorded their names. Imagine a desert night in ancient Thebes. The torches flicker on limestone walls. In a courtyard, herbs are crushed, linen is washed, births are witnessed, and secrets are passed from mother to daughter. No one writes their stories. No scribe bends over papyrus to document a midwife's hands guiding new life into the world, or a wife balancing household accounts in carefully organized jars of grain and oil. And yet these women shaped Egypt just as surely as any king. 3,400 years ago, there lived a woman known only as Meret, a field worker from the banks of the Nile. We know her name not from a grand monument, but from a scrap of pottery, an ostracon excavated in modern times near Deir el-Medina. It records something simple, almost painfully ordinary: 2 measures of barley. Received by Meret, that is all the world allowed her. But if you look closer, if you listen, if you slow down enough to breathe in the silence of the ancient desert, you can almost imagine the full life behind that single line. The sun rising over fields near the Valley of the Kings, the rhythmic slap of wet clay on a carrying basket, the scent of date wine fermenting in clay jars. Meret and her sisters were workers, wives, healers, singers. Forgotten women who sang lullabies that no one wrote down. Mourned loved ones whose tombs no longer exist, and whispered prayers to gods whose names have been erased by shifting sand. But then there were others, powerful, educated, astonishingly influential, whose legacies were buried not by time, but by deliberate silence. Consider Meret Peta, often referred to in modern interpretations as one of the earliest known physicians, said to have lived around 2700 BCE for decades. She appeared in articles and history books as the first female doctor in the world. Recent researchers now argue the evidence is uncertain, perhaps a misinterpretation. Still, the possibility lingers in the air like an unanswered riddle. Someone, somewhere in ancient Egypt, was a female physician. Someone diagnosed fevers, set broken bones, mixed honey and herbs for medicine. Someone touched the sick gently while the Nile flooded and withdrew, passing down knowledge in quiet, invisible lines. In ancient Egypt, women could own property, testify in court, and initiate divorce, something almost unthinkable in other ancient civilizations. Yet, the documents we have focused mostly on elites, queens, priestesses, royal daughters. The rest remain shadows. You can almost see them moving through painted halls, brushing past hieroglyphs that never mention them. A servant girl grinding grain until her hands grew calloused, singing under her breath while she waited for dawn. A grandmother telling stories about gods that scholars will never translate. A market vendor who knew every price of every loaf of bread in Thebes during the reign of Amenhotep III. Forgotten but real. And somewhere deeper, below the surface of neat historical categories, lies a darker question. How many stories were erased on purpose? How many women advised kings behind closed doors, yet were written out of history to preserve a myth of male power? Inside the tomb of Rekhmir, a powerful vizier under Thutmose III, a small and nearly unnoticed inscription lists women receiving wages for temple labor. Their names glide by almost apologetically. Nesmet, Hent, Toi. No biography, no story, just names. But even a name, when spoken out loud after 3,000 years of silence, becomes a kind of resurrection. And maybe that is how we begin, by speaking their names slowly, letting them settle in the air like desert sand. Egyptologists say history is often found in fragments: a chipped mirror, a faded linen shroud, a comb carved from ivory, still bearing traces of ancient hair. Sometimes the voice of a forgotten woman comes to us in something as simple as a letter. One surviving document, written around 1200 BCE, is from a woman named Nonekt, who lived in Deir el-Medina. She dictated a legal will disinheriting some of her children because, as she said plainly, they did not take care of her in her old age. Oh, steady and tired, crosses 3,000 years without effort. I am old, and I will not give to those who did not give to me. No pharaoh ever sounded more human, No monument ever sounded more honest. There is something quietly astonishing about that. A woman in ancient Egypt, speaking in a tone that could belong to any elderly mother in any modern courtroom today. Time collapses, the Nile flows backward. History stops feeling ancient and starts feeling alive, personal, familiar. And that is where our journey begins. In the unrecorded rooms, the forgotten corners, the whispers left behind by lives that mattered, even though the world chose not to remember them. Because sometimes the most powerful stories are not the ones carved in stone, but the ones rescued out of silence. There is a strange comfort in knowing that even in the world of pyramids and gods, life carried on in small, familiar ways. Picture a courtyard in Memphis during the 19th dynasty. The sun is just rising and the light is soft, golden slow. A woman named Ti sits by a reed mat, grinding malachite into fine powder for eye paint. She is not a queen, not a priestess, just an ordinary woman who knew how to make beauty from earth and stone. Ancient Egyptian women used coal not only for decoration, but as protection against infection. Something modern medical researchers suggest may have had genuine antibacterial properties. Through that single morning ritual, applying dark lines beneath her eyes, Tia was participating in a medical legacy stretching thousands of years. A chain of knowledge passed silently from mother to daughter. The history books Don T record the hours she spent at the riverbank, collecting green stones, or trading a handful of barley for a little animal fat to mix with her cosmetics. But her hands were precise, skilled, careful, a kind of artistry lost in time. And yet there were women who moved beyond homes and courtyards into places that shaped kingdoms. Consider the powerful figure of Amaznefortari, a queen from around 1550 BCE, honored as God's wife of Ammon. That title was not symbolic. It was political power, financial control, influence at the highest levels of religion and state. Temple records suggest she owned land, received income, and held authority priests were required to obey. Even today, her statues have a calm strength, eyes slightly distant, wearing a tall crown and a quiet assurance. But just as striking as the women we know are the mysteries around the ones we don't see. In ancient villages along the Nile, birth was a sacred moment, usually guided by women whose names never appeared on monuments. They knew herbs to ease pain, oils to soothe muscle, and rituals whispered under their breath. We have fragments of spells written in hieroglyphs, invoking gods to protect mother and child. But the real knowledge lived in hands and memories, not in books. Imagine a midwife in ancient Luxor, kneeling beside a woman giving birth, the air filled with incense, the sound of rushing Nile water somewhere outside. No pharaoh could issue a decree strong enough to match the power of that room. Life entered the world because of women whose names never reached a single scroll. Some of the most fascinating glimpses of forgotten women come from letters written on scraps of limestone, informal messages, quick notes. One woman wrote to her husband working far from home, "Do not forget to send oil. The children are restless." Another message addressed between neighbors complains that a borrowed cloak was never returned. These tiny domestic details reveal a truth no king's inscription ever could. Ancient Egypt was full of ordinary feelings, frustration, humor, longing, fatigue. And behind nearly every moment were women keeping life steady. Even religion, which seems dominated by towering male gods, hides a powerful feminine presence. Consider Hathor, the goddess of music and motherhood, or Isis, whose mythology places her at the center of resurrection and magic. The most famous myth in all Egyptian religion, the death and rebirth of Osiris, would be impossible without Isis's determination, grief, and knowledge. She searched across Egypt for the pieces of her husband's body, stored them through sacred rites, and gave life to Horus, the future king. Her role was nothing short of cosmic. Somewhere, real women looked to Isis for guidance, strength, and protection. But maybe the most astonishing evidence of forgotten female power is this. Ancient Egyptian women signed legal contracts. They bought and sold property. They could even stand in court as equals. There is a surviving divorce record where a woman states clearly she is ending a marriage and lists her possessions: jars of honey, linen garments, one donkey. Her voice is practical, measured, confident, and astonishingly modern. No dramatic language, just a person taking control of her life. Archaeologists have even found lists of household expenses written by women. One papyrus records a budget for bread, beer, fish, salt, and lamp oil. That means they handled money, scheduled meals, negotiated prices, and kept businesses alive. Imagine a woman named Satzobek sitting in a shaded room, counting jars of wheat while outside. The heat of the desert settles over the city. She knows exactly how long her supplies will last, when to buy more, and whom to trust. This is economic intelligence in its purest, simplest form, yet history ignored her. And in the shadows of temples, another quiet group of women held power in unseen ways: the priestesses. They tended shrines, prepared ritual offerings, and sometimes delivered divine messages interpreted through dreams and symbols. In some temples, only women could approach certain statues of goddesses, making their role not only spiritual, but protective. And while the names of male priests fill many walls, women's names are often absent or incomplete. We know they existed because of broken sculptures, half-faded funerary inscriptions, and fragments of jewelry found buried deep below temple floors. One necklace, discovered in a tomb at Abydos, bears a tiny inscription: "She who sings to the god." That is her whole identity, preserved across centuries. A singer, a priestess, someone who raised her voice in praise night after night, while the golden light of oil lamps flickered across polished stone. And then there is the greatest mystery of all. How many women's stories were erased not by accident but on purpose? Scholars have long argued that scribes recorded what rulers wanted remembered, not what actually happened. And rulers, most of them men, were not always eager to share credit. Somewhere in the lost papyri of history, perhaps there are notes about advisors, artists, astronomers, accountants, all women whose words helped shape decisions that changed empires. Their echoes still exist, faint but real, in every painted figurine, every woven basket, every carefully shaped amulet. When we look at ancient Egypt today, we see massive monuments and silent ruins. But every stone, every scrap of writing, every artifact whispers the same truth. Women were there, working, thinking, dreaming, surviving. Their stories may have been forgotten by history, but they were never truly gone. They wait in the silence, patient as sand, ready to be remembered by those willing to listen slowly in the soft darkness of a whispering night. In the quiet corners of ancient Thebes and Memphis, where the great temples cast long shadows over the bustling city streets, there existed women whose influence stretched far beyond the eye of the casual observer, shaping the very culture and spirituality of Egypt. Some were known to us only by fragments of hieroglyphs, yet their presence was unmistakable in the rituals, the architecture, and the rhythms of everyday life. High priestesses, for instance, wielded a subtle but undeniable power. Tasked with performing sacred rites, maintaining the altars, and interpreting divine messages, they ensured that the delicate balance between the mortal and divine remained intact. In temples dedicated to Hathor or Isis, their chants, their careful handling of sacred vessels, and their offerings orchestrated a bridge between gods and humans, a responsibility as weighty as any pharaoh's military campaign. And then there were women like Tauret, not the goddess but namesakes of mortal midwives who carried out rituals of birth and protection, safeguarding the lives of infants and mothers alike. These women often operated within complex networks of familial ties, apprenticeship, and community trust, passing down healing techniques and ritual knowledge from one generation to the next. The scrolls that survive today offer only hints, measurements of grains, payments for services, brief notations of ceremonial duties, but between these lines the real story pulses: women managing finances, distributing provisions, maintaining households, and ensuring that temples could continue to function. It is here that we meet women like Satzobek, whose inscriptions tell us she supervised workers, oversaw construction projects, and coordinated resources, a female administrator quietly orchestrating operations that would later be credited to men or simply left unnamed in official records. In marketplaces along the Nile, women sold linens, pottery, oils, and spices, negotiating prices and maintaining economic stability within the community. Their skill in barter, trade, and inventory management is often underestimated. Yet these activities formed the backbone of urban life, ensuring that food, clothing, and ritual items were available for both elite and common families. Meanwhile, some women ascended to almost legendary prominence in ways that survived, if only partially, through statuary, temple reliefs, and mortuary inscriptions. A figure like Ahotep I, the mother of Amos-I, is remembered for her role in rallying troops and preserving royal authority during turbulent times when the Hyksos invaded Egypt. She reportedly wore a ceremonial gold diadem and led funerary processions, earning accolades inscribed in temples long after her death. And then there is Hatshepsut, whose reign is better documented, yet still shrouded in quiet controversies. She assumed full pharaonic powers, wore the false beard of kings, commissioned temples, oversaw trade expeditions to Punt, and yet after her death many of her images were defaced, her statues broken, and her name erased in attempts to reinstate the narrative of male succession. The story repeats in whispers through Sobin-Faru, the last ruler of the 12th dynasty, whose brief reign signaled both the capability and fragility of female authority. Her image is often deliberately destroyed or decapitated, survive only partially, and historians must reconstruct her life from fragments and inscriptions scattered across the sands. Beyond queens and rulers, other women exerted influence through artistic and intellectual contributions. Female scribes documented religious ceremonies, legal contracts, and medical knowledge, while women artisans produced jewelry, pottery, and textiles that remain masterpieces of precision and aesthetics. Even in domestic spaces, women like Nonact, whose will survives on papyrus, exercised remarkable autonomy over property and inheritance, negotiating the distribution of goods to children who may have disappointed her expectations. These acts, small in the grand narrative of kings and gods, reveal an agency rarely acknowledged: women shaping the distribution of wealth, the education of children, the spiritual lives of families, and the continuity of culture. And when one contemplates the erasure of so many names, one begins to understand the subtlety of power. It does not always reside in monuments or official records. Sometimes it exists in the rhythm of daily life, in the passing of knowledge, in the quiet guidance of a daughter. The careful management of supplies, the chanting of hymns to unseen deities. The Nile itself seems to carry these memories downstream, the water murmuring the stories of women who tended fields, taught apprentices, healed the sick, and maintained the delicate social fabric of a civilization whose achievements are often attributed solely to men. And as we wander through the ruins of tombs, the worn steps of temples, and the fragments of murals, one realizes that history has always been selective. It has exalted those who wielded visible power, while obscuring those whose influence was intangible yet profound. Yet these women, though forgotten in conventional accounts, left imprints in clay, stone, papyrus, and in the very culture of Egypt itself. Their stories, waiting patiently under layers of sand and time, remind us that influence is not measured only by monuments built or armies led, but by the subtle shaping of lives, beliefs, and knowledge that echo across millennia. And if we pause, listen carefully, and allow the mind to wander among the silent corridors of the past, the whispers become audible, revealing a tapestry of female lives intertwined with the rise and fall of one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever known. They shaped the rhythms of daily life, guided kings and priests alike, ensured the continuity of rituals, preserved knowledge of herbs and medicine, and instilled moral and social codes that govern society. Though most of their names are lost, the pattern of their lives is clear. Women in ancient Egypt were never absent from history, only rendered invisible by the priorities of those who wrote its story. And tonight, as we breathe in the quiet of their shadows, we can begin to hear them again, faintly but unmistakably echoing across time, teaching us that influence, courage, and wisdom often travel in silence, waiting for the right ears to listen. As the sands of Egypt stretch endlessly under the sun, the lives of women in power emerge like mirages, visible only when observed carefully, patiently, and with attention to the smallest details. In the New Kingdom, where temples rose like mountains of stone and trade networks stretched to distant lands, there existed women whose influence was both subtle and monumental. Think of Queen Ahmose-Nefertari, mother of Amos-I, who survived the Hyksos invasion and not only preserved the royal line, but became the spiritual backbone of a nation. She was deified in her own lifetime. Temples were dedicated to her cult. She served as a model of piety and authority for generations. Her image appears in murals, her voice echoing through rituals that her male descendants would continue long after her death. Meanwhile, high-ranking women in religious hierarchies, known as God's Wives of Ammon, wielded enormous ceremonial and financial control. They managed temple lands, directed labor, oversaw offerings, and sometimes dictated policy through religious influence, positions that blended faith, politics, and economy in a seamless, often unrecorded, web of authority. It is in these roles that we begin to understand the depth of female agency, women orchestrating trade, influencing succession, controlling wealth, and shaping the spiritual consciousness of the state, all while remaining nearly invisible in official histories. Consider the story of a woman named Satimun, whose tomb at Thebes reveals inscriptions of her supervising temple estates, counting grain, and managing the work of dozens of men and women. Each record, painstakingly carved, is a faint echo of her intelligence, her authority, and her capacity to command respect in a patriarchal world. Ordinary women, too, carried extraordinary responsibility. Midwives guided life into the world. Healers applied remedies with knowledge that modern science still partially deciphers. And women scribes transcribed letters, inventories, and legal documents, ensuring that both daily life and dynastic affairs could proceed smoothly. Some women even held titles such as Chief Overseer of the Women, managing female laborers, supervising craft production, and ensuring that essential goods reached the temples, palaces, and towns. While pharaohs were glorified in stone, the labor, wisdom, and management of women like these were recorded only in minor inscriptions, papyri, and occasionally in scattered hieroglyphs, often left for modern archaeologists to piece together centuries later. Then there were queens who deliberately exercised political power beyond ceremonial roles. Take, for instance, Hatshepsut, the female pharaoh who wore the ceremonial beard of kings and commanded expeditions to Punt, bringing back gold, incense, and exotic animals. Her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari stands as a testament to her architectural vision and political audacity, yet after her death many of her statues were defaced. Her name erased and her reign minimized in later records, a reminder that power exercised by women was often contested and deliberately suppressed. Likewise, Sobonferu, ruling at the end of the 12th dynasty, demonstrates that women could claim the throne in times of crisis, managing both governance and ceremonial obligations, even as subsequent rulers attempted to erase her from memory. Beyond queens, women shaped culture through education and craft. They instructed daughters, trained scribes, produced objects that carried symbolic meaning, amulets, jewelry, ceremonial clothing, each item a vehicle of social, religious, and economic influence. In domestic spaces, women like Nanact wielded legal authority, dictating wills and inheritance, ensuring that property remained in family hands and asserting personal agency in ways often overlooked in patriarchal histories. The quiet influence of women also extended to medicine. Women who were midwives or herbalists treated ailments, managed childbirth, and provided continuity in healthcare, using remedies passed down through generations. Some of these women were attached to temples, integrating spiritual and medicinal knowledge, blending ritual with practical healing in a sophisticated system that few men fully understood or acknowledged. Even trade and market life was shaped by women. They supervised shops, negotiated prices, controlled distribution of essential goods, and managed household economies, effectively sustaining cities and towns while kings campaigned or priests conducted elaborate rituals. And perhaps most astonishing is how these women, despite their invisibility in official records, orchestrated lives at scale, managing labor forces, directing temple operations, influencing royal succession, and shaping moral and spiritual codes for entire communities. Their legacies survive faintly in partial inscriptions, damaged reliefs, and scattered papyri, but the evidence is consistent. Women were architects of continuity, wielders of power, and shapers of the very civilization that has long been attributed almost exclusively to men. Listening closely to these whispers across millennia, one can hear not just isolated acts of courage, but a continuum of female presence threading through the history of Egypt. They were advisors, managers, healers, educators, and leaders. They were the silent hands that built and maintained temples, the voices guiding rituals, the minds directing logistics, and the hearts sustaining families, cities, and dynasties. History may have preferred to remember kings and conquerors, but the rhythm of daily life, the continuity of belief, and the endurance of cultural and economic systems depended on these women. Every jar of grain counted, every chant uttered, every decree issued, every household managed. It was all a part of the architecture of civilization, largely invisible, yet indispensable. And so in the whispering night among the ruins of temples and tombs, the echoes of these forgotten women grow clearer, teaching us that influence does not always roar, that authority does not always sit on thrones, and that sometimes the most enduring power is the one exercised quietly, consistently, and patiently over lifetimes that history tried to forget but cannot entirely erase. As the sun sets over the Nile, casting long shadows across the stone pylons and the silent courtyards of Luxor and Karnak, one begins to sense that the story of ancient Egyptian women is not just one of queens and priestesses, but of countless lives that are twined with the pulse of the civilization itself. Beyond the names we know, Hatshepsut, Sobonferu, Amasnefertari, there were multitudes of women whose influence, though hidden, shaped the spiritual, cultural, and social foundation of Egypt. In towns and villages, women managed grain storage, supervised artisans, and ensured that the river cycles were matched with planting and harvesting schedules, a precision that kept empires fed and functioning. They trained apprentices, taught daughters and sons, preserved knowledge of herbs, remedies, and midwifery, and passed on practical wisdom that sustained households across generations. Within temples, high priestesses directed ceremonies, maintained ritual purity, and interpreted sacred omens, while lesser-known attendants prepared offerings and tended to statues, ensuring the gods were honored and the divine order maintained. In some cases, these women were remarkably powerful. Titles such as Chief of the Harem or Overseer of Women appear in tomb inscriptions, suggesting authority over large groups of female workers, administrators, and ritual performers, with responsibilities ranging from supervising production to managing finances. Everyday women, too, exercised agency in ways that echo faintly across time. A woman's signature on a papyrus contract or her careful notation of property transactions was a declaration of autonomy, testament that she could navigate both domestic and civic life with authority. Even when men dominated political and military spheres, women influenced outcomes through counsel, ritual knowledge, and mastery of social networks. There are stories of women advising kings behind closed doors, of mothers directing dynastic marriages that secured alliances, of sisters protecting heirs and heirs' futures, all while remaining invisible in official accounts. Consider the midwives, often anonymous, who ensured the survival of generations of practical and spiritual duty that combined knowledge of herbs, timing, ritual chants, and observation of celestial patterns. Or the female scribes who transcribed letters and managed records, holding keys to administrative continuity while their male counterparts received credit. These women were educators, healers, negotiators, and protectors of culture, performing acts of enduring influence that shaped the very fabric of Egyptian society. Even in the realm of art and craft, women left enduring traces. Jewelry, textiles, pottery, and decorative work often bear marks of their careful hands, demonstrating skill, creativity, and aesthetic sensibility. Many of these items, once buried in tombs or stored in temple storerooms, continue to communicate across millennia, offering a silent testimony to the women whose labor ensured beauty, utility, and sacred significance. Yet despite all of this, history often chose to record only what fit the narrative of male power, reducing women to wives, mothers, or decorative figures. Their contributions, whether in palace, temple, or marketplace, were minimized, erased, or left undocumented. Modern archaeology, however, has begun to illuminate these lives. Fragments of papyri, temple inscriptions, tomb relics, and artifacts slowly piece together the mosaic of female experience, revealing a pattern of agency, intelligence, and influence that is astonishing in its breadth and depth. From queens who ruled directly to women who silently orchestrated household, temple, and community life. These forgotten figures were architects of civilization. They influenced politics, economics, spirituality, and culture, leaving traces in ways both subtle and profound. And so, as we walk along the banks of the Nile today, amid the ruins and the sand, listening carefully to the echoes of the past, we can begin to hear the soft, persistent whispers of women whose names may be lost, but whose lives shaped the course of history. Their stories teach us that power does not always reside in monuments or in the annals of kings, that influence can be exercised in quiet, steady, and consistent ways, and that the essence of a civilization is often carried forward by those whom history tried to forget. And tonight, if you allow the mind to drift, you can imagine their hands tending the hearth, their voices chanting prayers, their eyes watching over children, and kings alike, and you realize that in every grain of sand, every ripple of the Nile, their presence endures, shaping the world long after their names have faded from the walls of temples, reminding us that the deepest legacies are often invisible, whispered across time, waiting for someone to listen. As night deepens over the Nile, and the stars reflect like scattered gold across the water, the lives of ancient Egyptian women become even more vivid, moving behind palace doors, temple halls, and dusty village streets where history rarely records them. In Thebes, a woman named Tawahiber oversees a household of servants, scribes, and apprentices, ensuring that the production of cloth, pottery, and food continues seamlessly for both domestic use and trade. Her influence, though unrecorded in grand monuments, sustains communities and creates ripples of stability across the city. Meanwhile, in the sacred precincts of Karnak, priestesses prepare for the nightly rituals of Ammon, chanting hymns, arranging offerings, and maintaining the sanctity of spaces that connect mortals to gods. They carefully manage the temple economy, allocating resources for ceremonies and supervising temple workers, their authority extensive, yet almost invisible to the male-dominated records of the time. There are also midwives, anonymous but essential, whose skill ensures the survival of generations. They memorize birthing rituals, know which herbs calm pain or prevent infection, and teach apprentices the delicate balance between medicine and magic. Knowledge that is passed down quietly, forming the backbone of healthcare in villages that may never see a physician or scribe. Beyond health and religion, women influence education and the preservation of knowledge. Mothers teach daughters the skills needed to manage households, while literate women act as scribes or tutors, guiding young scribes in the art of writing hieroglyphs, recording taxes, and copying religious texts. Their work ensures that the administrative machinery of the kingdom continues without interruption. It's often unseen yet indispensable. There are accounts of women in craft guilds and artisan families, producing jewelry, perfumes, and ceremonial artifacts. Each amulet, each intricately woven linen garment, each pot shaped and painted carries evidence of their precision, creativity, and vision, contributing to Egypt's renowned cultural legacy. Even merchants' wives oversee trade in marketplaces, negotiating deals, managing inventory, and ensuring the survival of families while their husbands are absent on business or campaign. Their role is economic, social, and often political, bridging gaps between local communities and distant centers of power. And then there are the women whose stories are partially preserved in letters, contracts, and wills, revealing surprising autonomy. Nonek, for instance, recorded her own property and made deliberate choices about inheritance, asserting authority over her household in a legal, documented manner. Another woman, Timarones, is noted for her role in supervising temple laborers, overseeing the allocation of grain and maintaining the well-being of workers, demonstrating managerial skill that rivals modern administrative practices. Queens, too, continued to demonstrate extraordinary political acumen. Hatshepsut's elaborate mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari, with its long colonnades and detailed reliefs depicting the voyage to Punt, serves not only as a monument of her reign, but also as a record of her organizational genius coordinating labor, securing supplies, and leading diplomatic and economic missions that span seas and deserts. Sobonferu, though ruling briefly, demonstrates that women could wield the ultimate authority, engaging with priests, officials, and military leaders, leaving traces of their political and ceremonial decisions and inscriptions that survive despite later erasure. Even outside the royal sphere, Women's spiritual influence cannot be overstated. Female ritualists performed ceremonies that were believed to maintain Mat, the balance and order of the cosmos, without which the kingdom itself might falter. Their chants, their precise handling of ritual implements, and their understanding of sacred timing ensured that gods were appeased. Harvests were blessed and communities remained harmonious. And amidst all of this, ordinary women, whose names are mostly lost, shaped the daily life of Egypt with subtle, profound impact. They raised children, supervised laborers, guided apprentices, managed resources, and preserved traditions, work that, while invisible to most historical records, was foundational to the survival of a civilization. The fragments of their existence, a will, a contract, a jar inscription, a painted figurine, allow us to hear whispers of lives once considered insignificant, now slowly emerging from silence. Their resilience, creativity, intelligence, and quiet leadership remind us that history is more than kings and battles. It is also the sum of countless ordinary actions performed consistently and conscientiously over generations. In every market, temple, and home, women orchestrated continuity, stability, and growth. They influenced spiritual practices, sustained economies, educated the next generation, and ensured the survival of the community in ways that echo faintly but persistently through time. And when we slow down, when we allow ourselves to breathe with the rhythm of the Nile and the flickering shadows of temple lamps, we can almost hear them. The songs of mothers, the instructions of priestesses, the careful notes of scribes, and the whispered negotiations of merchants' wives, all composing a symphony of female agency that endured in silence, invisible yet vital, echoing across centuries. These are the forgotten women of Egypt, alive in their absence, their impact profound. Their whispers persistent, waiting patiently for the world to finally listen. As the night deepens and the Nile shimmers under the silver gaze of the moon, the lives of Egypt's forgotten women become a tapestry of influence, resilience, and quiet genius, stretching across centuries yet largely hidden from the records of kings and conquerors. These women, midwives, priestesses, scribes, artisans, merchants, and queens, were the lifeblood of Egyptian civilization, sustaining families, communities, and empires, while their names were often left unrecorded. Imagine a day in the bustling city of Thebes, the sun climbing slowly over sandstone temples. A woman named Izzet supervises a team of weavers in her courtyard, directing patterns for ceremonial linens that will adorn temples and palaces. Her skill ensures that sacred rituals are properly clothed, while her authority organizes labor and preserves tradition. Nearby, a priestess named Nebet guides novices in ritual practice, her voice calm yet commanding as she teaches chants, offerings, and sacred gestures that maintain the Ma at the cosmic order that underpins all of Egyptian life. Elsewhere, midwives at the riverbank kneel beside mothers in labor, reciting prayers and applying herbs known for millennia, assuring the survival of infants who will one day inherit a civilization shaped in part by their unseen hands. Queens like Hatshepsut and Sobonferu illustrate the extraordinary heights women could reach, combining political power with religious authority, commissioning monumental architecture and leading trade missions, yet their legacies were often deliberately obscured after death, as if the civilization could not fully accept that women could wield such influence. Beyond the elites, ordinary women demonstrated equally remarkable agency. In marketplaces, they negotiated trade, tracked grain and oil, and managed household economies. In domestic spaces, they maintained social order, transmitted knowledge, and nurtured the next generation of scribes, priests, and citizens. Archaeological fragments, letters, wills, contracts, inscriptions, and artifacts hint at a complex web of authority, skill, and ingenuity exercised by women at every level of society. Some of these women even shaped legal structures. The Will of Nanak, for example, reveals her deliberate decisions about inheritance, illustrating a legal autonomy that allowed her to assert control over property and family in ways that challenge modern assumptions about gender in ancient societies. Similarly, priestesses and temple administrators managed significant resources, supervised labor, and maintained religious institutions, blending spiritual guidance with practical governance. Often with subtle but profound influence on the policies and decisions of male rulers, these women, whose lives were recorded only in fragments, left echoes in art, craft, and ritual. Jewelry, pottery, textiles, and amulets produced by women carry symbolic and practical significance, reflecting both artistic talent and societal roles. Every object becomes a witness to female creativity, a reminder that their hands shaped the material and spiritual culture of Egypt. Even as official histories emphasize pharaohs and male priests, the cumulative impact of these women was essential to the survival, prosperity, and continuity of one of history's greatest civilizations. Their power lay in continuity and quiet, consistent acts that influenced governance, religion, economy, education, and daily life. From guiding childbirth to directing trade, from supervising temple rites to shaping dynastic succession, their work ensured stability, survival, and progress across generations. And as modern archaeologists uncover remnants of these lives, shards of pottery, traces of pigment, faded hieroglyphs, papyrus scrolls, we are slowly able to hear their voices again, whispering across millennia. They speak of intelligence, courage, resilience, and creativity exercised in the quiet spaces of homes, temples, and markets. They demonstrate that leadership, influence, and wisdom are not measured solely by monumental architecture or conquests, but by the subtle shaping of human experience and culture over generations. And tonight, as we drift into the calm embrace of history, we can allow ourselves to listen, to imagine the voices of midwives, scribes, priestesses, artisans, merchants, and queens resonating softly through the corridors of time, reminding us that the forgotten women of ancient Egypt were never absent. They were simply waiting in silence and patience for the world to recognize the indelible mark they left upon civilization, their whispers now finally heard, echoing across sands, Nile waters, and the very soul of a culture that continues to fascinate, inspire, and teach us the enduring power of quiet, persistent influence. As dawn stretches across the Nile, painting the riverbanks with pale gold, the hidden lives of ancient Egyptian women emerge more vividly, revealing a civilization sustained by their relentless energy, knowledge, and wisdom. In quiet courtyards, women ground grains and prepared meals for extended families, their hands moving rhythmically, efficiently, carrying knowledge inherited over generations. Their role was not merely domestic, it was organizational, economic, and social, ensuring that households, villages, and communities functioned seamlessly while kings and pharaohs made their public appearances. Beyond the household, women contributed to the spiritual and cultural identity of Egypt. Priestesses and temple attendants, often unrecorded in monumental inscriptions, meticulously prepared offerings, maintained ritual purity, and preserved sacred chants and rites that connected humanity to the divine. The delicate rhythm of these rituals, taught from mentor to apprentice, ensured that religion, law, and society remained intertwined. In Deir el-Medina, a village dedicated to the artisans building royal tombs, women managed provisions, supervised work crews, and even engaged in legal contracts, demonstrating autonomy and authority in areas typically assumed to be male-dominated. Their influence extended into craft and artistry, weaving intricate linens, creating ceremonial jewelry, painting tomb reliefs, and producing ritual artifacts, all while maintaining social cohesion and teaching younger generations the skills required to sustain their society. Queens like Hatshepsut, Sobonferu, and Amosnefortari exemplified the heights of political and religious authority. Yet even beyond the palaces, ordinary women wielded quiet but significant power. Mothers directed households, managed wealth, and transmitted values. Daughters trained in scribal and ritual skills carried knowledge forward. Healers and midwives preserved life itself, blending empirical knowledge with spiritual insight. Even the marketplace was shaped by women, merchants, wives, and independent traders negotiating prices, supervising storage, and ensuring the circulation of goods critical to urban survival. Many of these women operated in what we might now call invisible networks of influence, extracting resources, managing labor, and maintaining societal continuity without public recognition. The archaeological record, consisting of papyri, ostraca inscriptions, and artifacts, offers glimpses into these lives. Non-acts will detailing inheritance, fragmented letters illustrating domestic concerns, legal documents reflecting autonomy, and temple inscriptions, noting the presence of female overseers, midwives, and ritual practitioners. Each fragment is a whisper of agency, intelligence, and skill, revealing the depth of women's contributions to Egypt's cultural, economic, and spiritual life. And yet, history often obscured these contributions, focusing on kings and male officials while leaving the most essential architects of continuity invisible. Even so, the evidence is undeniable. Women guided the rhythms of daily life, preserved sacred knowledge, ensured the survival of communities, educated future generations, and influenced political and economic structures in profound ways. Their power lay not in conquest, but in endurance, in the quiet orchestration of life, culture, and belief. Across temples, villages, and palaces, women maintained the machinery of civilization, often without recognition, yet always with impact. And as modern scholars unearth papyri, tomb inscriptions, and artifacts, the voices of these forgotten women become more audible, teaching lessons about resilience, ingenuity, and quiet leadership that transcend time. In the hush of a desert night, amid the ruins of Luxor and Karnak, their whispers persist, flowing like the Nile itself, subtle, persistent, shaping the course of history in ways monumental records fail to acknowledge. And when we take a moment to listen, to imagine the rhythm of their daily lives and the depth of their unseen influence, we can begin to understand that civilization is built not only by rulers and warriors, but by those whose quiet, consistent, and patient work forms the foundation of every enduring culture. These forgotten women of ancient Egypt, whether priestesses, midwives, scribes, queens, or artisans, remind us that power is not always visible, and that the most enduring legacies often lie hidden, waiting for centuries to be rediscovered, whispered back into life by those willing to hear the truths lost beneath the sands of time. As the centuries unfold along the fertile banks of the Nile, one realizes that the vast monuments, towering obelisks, and ornate temples only tell a fragment of Egypt's story. The true lifeblood of this civilization flowed through the hands, minds, and voices of women who labored, guided, and innovated in both visible and invisible ways. In villages tucked between papyrus reeds and mud brick homes, women managed agricultural production with a skill that rivaled modern expertise, tracking seasonal floods, allocating seed and water, and ensuring that harvests would feed both their families and the state. Their expertise extended to animal husbandry, dairy management, and food preservation, all essential for the survival of communities. Particularly during years of drought or political upheaval, in the shadow of grand temples, female scribes recorded inventories, contracts, and religious texts, quietly shaping the administrative backbone of Egypt. Their handwriting preserved knowledge, ensured compliance with taxation and trade regulations, and transmitted religious ritual, making them indispensable to both civic and spiritual continuity. Midwives and healers practiced medicine with a sophisticated understanding of herbs, minerals, and practical anatomy, blending empirical observation with ritual, often performing life-saving interventions while also invoking divine protection for mother and child. In some cases, women wielded extraordinary legal power, drafting wills, negotiating contracts, and managing estates, their decisions affecting the livelihoods of entire families. Queens, beyond their ceremonial roles, exercised political influence and economic control, commissioning temples, directing trade, and even leading military expeditions indirectly through strategic alliances and counsel. Hatshepsut's famed expedition to Punt not only brought back wealth and exotic goods, but also solidified her authority in ways that reshaped Egyptian diplomacy and commerce. Sobonferu, though reigning briefly, navigated political structures to assert legitimacy, while women such as Amasnefertari were revered as spiritual and cultural icons, their decisions resonating across generations. Yet the most remarkable power often lay with ordinary women. Artisans' wives oversaw workshops producing jewelry, textiles, and ritual objects, while marketplace traders ensured economic circulation, negotiated trade, and maintained vital connections between towns and villages. Mothers educated children, instilling cultural, ethical, and practical knowledge that would ripple through society. ensuring continuity of literacy, ritual practice, and craft skills. Female laborers, although rarely named, coordinated production for temple offerings and royal projects, creating a web of influence that extended far beyond the domestic sphere. Even religious life depended heavily on women. Priestesses and female ritualists maintained sacred precincts, performed ceremonies, and interpreted divine omens, ensuring that the spiritual fabric of the state remained intact. Across every sphere, women's contributions were often invisible in monumental records, yet indispensable to the functioning of society. Archaeological fragments, letters, papyri, astraka, tomb inscriptions, and artifacts reveal patterns of agency, intellect, and skill, reminding us that the history of Egypt is inseparable from the lives of its women. These women orchestrated stability and progress, blending domestic management, economic acumen, spiritual authority, and cultural preservation into a seamless web that allowed the civilization to thrive for millennia. Their whispers echo through hieroglyphs, the contours of statuary, the meticulous lines of papyrus, and the patterns of artifacts, offering insights into lives that were simultaneously ordinary and extraordinary. And as we listen to these echoes, we understand that the invisible hands of women sustained kings, priests, and citizens alike, shaping policies, rituals, economies, and social structures in ways that remain astonishing even today. History may have neglected to name them all, but their influence is etched into the foundations of temples, the rhythm of marketplaces, the continuity of knowledge, and the very survival of Egyptian society. And so, as we drift through the quiet corridors of memory, listening to the soft cadence of time, the forgotten women of ancient Egypt reveal themselves not as shadows, but as architects, sustainers, and guides of one of the world's most enduring civilizations, their whispers carrying the wisdom, courage, and patience that shaped not only a kingdom but the very idea of cultural continuity across the millennia. As the sun sets once more over the timeless Nile, casting its golden reflection over temple pylons, tombs, and villages, the vast, intricate tapestry of forgotten Egyptian women becomes unmistakably clear. These were women whose names may never have been recorded, whose faces may never have been immortalized in grand statues, yet whose influence was omnipresent, shaping households, guiding dynasties, sustaining economies, and preserving the spiritual heart of a civilization that has fascinated the world for millennia. From the quiet diligence of midwives and healers, ensuring the survival of infants, to scribes documenting contracts, religious rituals, and daily life, every action taken by women rippled across generations. Queens like Hatshepsut and Sobonferu challenged conventions, asserting authority over land, labor, trade, and diplomacy, commissioning monumental works, and directing religious rites often at great personal and political risk. While ordinary women simultaneously preserved cultural continuity in ways that remain invisible to the historical record. Women managed markets, oversaw artisans, trained apprentices, guided children in literacy and ritual, and maintained both social and spiritual order. Priestesses orchestrated ceremonies, interpreted omens, and managed temple economies, blending divine guidance with practical administration. Even in death, women's impact resonates. Tombs of female administrators, inscriptions on papyri, and artifacts reveal patterns of leadership, creativity, and resilience, giving modern scholars glimpses into the breadth and depth of their agency. These forgotten women remind us that influence does not always roar through the annals of kings and wars. Often it flows quietly through everyday acts, patient guidance, careful decision-making, and a profound understanding of the forces shaping their world. Their labor, wisdom, and foresight ensured not only survival, but the flourishing of a civilization, creating the conditions for art, architecture, literature, religion, and governance to thrive. And as we reflect on the shadows and whispers left behind, we realize that Egypt's enduring grandeur is inseparable from the lives of those whom history tried to erase. The Nile, eternal and unchanging, continues to carry the echoes of their footsteps, their chants, their careful management of both household and state, reminding us that power, resilience, and wisdom often reside in the quiet, patient and persistent contributions of those deemed invisible. Their stories teach a timeless lesson, that influence is measured not solely by monuments, wars, or royal decrees, but by the consistent, thoughtful, and courageous shaping of lives, communities, and culture over generations. And tonight, as the desert wind brushes against temple stones and the moonlight shimmers across ancient waterways, the forgotten women of Egypt speak, softly but undeniably teaching us that the true architects of history are not always those whose names appear in gold or stone, but those who quietly, persistently, and profoundly shape the world around them, leaving echoes that continue to guide, inspire, and remind us of the enduring power of human resilience and wisdom.